recently a lot of YouTubers whose work I, enjoy or respect or whatever. Several of these guys have come out and said, these are my favorite invasion builds in the case of Rehvion, or what I consider to be the best invasion builds in the case of Rehvion, actually. NYFF put out a video talking about the Astora Greatsword as his favorite Poise weapon for invasions. The game ECONOMIST came out with a video with like his top 10 favorite invasion weapons. A lot of times on Reddit, people will tag me in conversations about this sort of thing, asking about what I think the best invasion weapons are. And then occasionally, I've gotten comments that basically hit the nail right on the head, which is to say, I really don't have any sort of favorite invasion weapon. Obviously, the Lothric Knight Sword and Shield has been a staple forever on this channel. And I do think that the Straight Sword moveset is the best moveset in Dark Souls 3. I kind of wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't as good as it was, but it is, so that's where we're at. But I don't really think in terms of what's best, what's worse. Because, to be honest, most of the time when I'm doing invasions, I'll have like a set list of weapons for that character that they'll use. Stuff that I think makes sense for that character, kind of. So, what ends up happening is you get accustomed to using the weapons that you have as tools. And that's exactly the sort of thing that sort of signifies, I guess, the way that I do invasions. And like I was alluding to earlier, I've had comments where I think people really nailed that. And, they said, hey, you should talk about how weapons are, your weapons are tools, and that's exactly it. Your weapons are tools. Now, are there better tools than others? Yes. If you're going to use an Ultra Greatsword, and you want to be as efficient as possible, the Astora's Greatsword is a great choice. It has 0 requirements for the most part. Strength and dex requirements are both minimal at best. It works well on any fucking infusion you want to use on it. Just an all-around good weapon. The dark builds, I think, kind of give people like a glimpse of what you can do, because you can infuse every weapon that you want dark, and then have that chaos riposte dagger. I was joking around on Twitch one day, and I said it was a dagger that would like so powerful. Or maybe I was on Discord, I don't remember, but I was talking about how it's a dagger so powerful that it could just erase your character's save file from the game. And then somebody started, I believe it was nobody, started calling it the time travel abortion dagger. Yeah, that's pretty. Time travel abortion dagger. That's pretty spot on for that thing. I am not a listy person. I think it's human nature to want to like throw 10 bullet points on a piece of paper and then put weapons next to it. So there's nothing wrong with that. People just like doing that. It makes it easier to organize stuff. But that's just not the way my brain works. There are other people that are like that. And as opposed to doing that, I thought, maybe it would be fun to just sort of, like, let's talk about everything. right? People complain a lot about the balance in Dark Souls 3, which is fine. But there is balance. It's just not what you would expect. Or I guess it's not in any way that people really want to pay attention to. When people talk about balance, a lot of times they're talking about duelists and arena balance. And again, I put forth the proposition that FromSoft doesn't give a shit about what duelists want. Because this game isn't really made for that. Street Fighter has 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 buttons on your controller when you play Street Fighter do attacks. In Dark Souls 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you want to get like absolutely super technical. 5. It's not the same thing. It's not. Now, the things that aren't balanced are the things that people are going to gravitate towards, right? Regardless of whether or not you've watched a video that says, hey, these are the best weapons to use, you're still going to move towards those things. I know I bring up Street Fighter a lot. That's the game I played. So, yeah, when you start talking about 1v1 shit, I'm going to talk about Street Fighter. Now, the imbalanced thing I was talking about, like straight swords. Everybody just gravitates towards the fucking straight sword, and you should. It's really good. Which straight sword's the best? Well, that depends on your build, doesn't it? If you want to have that conversation, let's just say which build is the best. Dark build. Then which sword is the best? Well, which one's got the easiest stat requirements? Are you playing at 120? You playing at level 125? Lothric Knight straight sword. Goddard's. Toss up. Whichever way you want to go. I don't care. Are you playing with a dark build at level, 36? I think it is. My boy Amish, I Am Amish, is playing a dark build at level 36. He's got the longsword. Because that's what the stats on his build allow him to use. So, when we talk about balance, to me, it's not just as simple as, slapping those bullet points down. Take a look at situations. 3 guys with straight swords. How often are you going to run into that? Fairly often. So it's good to have some sort of poise weapon in your arsenal. If you're a heavy poise build, you can run an ultra greatsword. If you're not a heavy poise build, maybe run a great hammer. But you get so in. I could spiral on forever about that because of the paper rock scissorsness of Dark Souls PvP. There's a call and response to invasions and just the PvP in general, where certain weapons will shine well in certain situations. Against a bunch of guys with ultra great swords, a sword and a shield is great because it allows you to hit, get in, get out, be done. Which straight sword is best? Some people will say Lothric Knight sword. I think a lot of people would say Lothric Knight sword. Ask them 1 year ago, and they would have said dark sword. Ask them, the patch before that, and they would have said broadsword. Ask them the patch before that, and they would have said the longsword. Ask them the patch after that, and they'll tell you it's Goddard's. It just depends on what you want to do. But a longsword is a longsword. Outside of something like, the broken straight sword, which is honestly still not that bad of a weapon. I'm not sure what you would have to do to find the perfect stat spread to use all of the best of every class of weapon to get the most out of your tools. But Saint, we want a video where you talk about the best. Buy me a beer. Sit me down at the bar. Get me talking. I don't know what... this is a 72-hour-long conversation you're talking about having with me. I can't do this in a video. I have... Like... the other day, I got a comment on an old video, and a guy was like, hey, show off this weapon. So I sent him a link, and he meant, oh, I meant the other weapon. You misunderstood me, Saint. I meant the other weapon. And that's so I sent him a link of another video that was old. I've used all this shit. I've got 300 videos on this goddamn channel. I've used a lot of shit. What it comes down to is, what does your build do? Yo, what that build do, girl? Does that build do Black Knight Greatsword? Alright. No? Then, it can do Cathedral Knight Greatsword. Alright, so I'm going to pause the video here, the conversation. What you just saw was priority upon riposte. Priority upon riposte, that's what I'm calling it. I'm sure a lot of people have realized that ripostes have iframes, parries, and ripostes, but they also have priority. Notice how I escaped an R1 true combo there by mashing R1 to take that riposte. Don't ever be afraid to try and take a parry because you might get hit, because taking the riposte takes priority over everything else in the game. You can escape an Ultra Greatsword's R1 true combo. You know what I mean? Also, a lot of times, and there's been plenty of people who put up videos that have not really shown this off, but I assume most of you are familiar with it. There's like a brief window of time where you have iframes in between a parry and a riposte. I just wanted to add to that conversation by showing off the quote-unquote priority. In fighting games, it's called priority. I don't know what the fuck it would be called here, but... Alright, so... back to the discussion at hand. Your tools. It's all tools. Everything's tools. Every weapon is a tool. And how each weapon class, I'll say, is a tool. And when you decide to use each one is what determines and gives them value. Not necessarily, the best stats or anything. If you want to go that deep into it, then by all means do. For example, people could sit around together and argue about what the best katana is. I think most people will tell you it's the washing pole, simply because of the range. And then some people might say it's the Chaos Blade because it's the perfect balance between range and damage. I don't give a shit. All that matters to me is that it can run and poke. That's it. Run and poke butts. And spears can do that too. If you want to find the one that's best, then go ahead. The problem is, you're not going to be able to combine the best of everything on one build unless you're running a quality build, which is what makes quality builds good. They lose out on damage, but they get to use the best of everything. But if you're losing out on damage, then you haven't maximized the quote-unquote usefulness of the item in question, right? So this is where dark builds become so handy. And I think everyone will agree that dark builds are probably the best builds to use in Dark Souls 3, period. You get dark weapons, Chaos Dagger, you get all the damage, and a good variety of weapons depending on how you spread out those stats. But when you're running a dark build, can you use the Millwood bow? Have you put those stats aside? Have you put aside enough stats to use a good hyper armor weapon? That kind of thing. There are little trade-offs you have to make. Now, I think the less you have to give up, the better, obviously. The least you're going to have to give up is on a dark build. On a quality build, you're giving up damage. On a dex build, you're giving up tools. On a strength build, you're giving up tools. But that only touches like the surface when it comes to the depth of invasions. I've been talking for 15 minutes and I haven't even like spoken of rings. I've only barely mentioned alluring skulls. There's everything in this game to use. And again, this is why I've never, not once, given a shit about the quote-unquote try-hard duels. It just, what are you using? The same 4 items. 5, whatever. Fuck, 6, 10. There's 200. There's 200 things to use. And it boggles my mind that all of these things go without being used. Like the rope firebombs, even. Like, only recently have I discovered how absolutely useful those things can be. And I've been playing this game for 1.5 years now. New game win. New game win. Skip to the end. In a game that lets you have 10 character slots, I don't see why you would want to run the same build 10 times. So for each of your builds, optimize accordingly. Or just play with what's fun. Later, y'all.